Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Hook, my reading is that Iran's power position has changed quite significantly as a result of Turks going into Syria, wiping out our friends, the Kurds that are remaining, rushing to Assad and pledging support to Assad. This changes the dynamic for Iran, I presume, in Iran's view, in a very positive way. I presume Iran was smiling from ear to ear as Turkey rushed into Syria. Am I right that this really changes the dynamic for Iran in Syria and perhaps regionally?
We do not believe that it changes the dynamic with Iran because in terms of our strategy...
Things are not better for Iran in the Middle East as we have gone, as Turkey has hit the Kurds, and the Kurds have now allied with Assad. So surely Assad is stronger. And this isn't good for Iran?
If you take a look at what our U.S. Special Representative Jim Jeffrey has said for some time now, our military is in Syria for ISIS. Our diplomacy is focused on Iran. And so that's why Jim Jeffrey and I work together very closely, because what I do on the pressure side and what he does on withholding reconstruction assistance is mutually reinforcing.
I hear you, but diplomacy has impact if there's a military that's strong and in the region, and when our ally now aligns with our adversary, Assad, that is, in my opinion, not helpful for diplomacy and not helpful for our interests in the region. That's so dramatic a perspective on your part that Iran is not celebrating what's happening in Syria is extraordinary to me. Let me turn to a different area, which is that I do agree that there is an enormous benefit in putting pressure on Iran. Whether it's maximum pressure or not, I don't know. But I believe that a nation that decides to go nuclear should suffer a dramatic cost for doing so. Whether or not they're at their knees or not, I don't know. And it's very hard for us to tell from the outside what's actually going on inside Iran. But clearly, it would have a dramatic effect if other nations were to join us in applying maximum pressure. What are the prospects for our European friends, for other nations around the world joining us, either with the snapback provisions being applied or not on a snapback basis? What are the prospects of us actually seeing truly maximum pressure, because it's applied not just by us but by our friends as well?
There is no precedent in Iran's history for the kind of pressure that we have put on them. And the regime has said this publicly. That they're experiencing the kind of economic contraction that is and will be worse than what happened during the Iran-Iraq War in the 80s. We have done a very good job of drying up Iran's sources of export revenue, but we've devoted as much energy to enforcing our sanctions, especially in the case of the oil sanctions. And I think that the fact that the UK, France, and Germany have now acknowledged something that we saw some time ago, that the Iran deal is insufficient to address Iran's threats to peace and security, and that when you are inside the deal, you can't touch your energy or your financial sanctions. That was the deal. So being out of the deal gives us a great deal more leverage to accomplish the objectives of denying Iran a nuclear weapon and on missile proliferation, which I think other countries are starting to recognize.
I'm not one of those that thinks we should be back in JCPOA, right. And I do believe that there should be an enormous price paid by a country that decides to go nuclear. I don't know whether we'll actually ever see Iran make a different decision. But my question is there some prospect of our being able to get other nations to join us in applying maximum pressure on Iran, or must we continue to do it alone?
I think it depends on how. So Europe has done a lot. They have not reimposed the financial sanctions that were in place. But when you look at what Europe has done since the time that we left the Iran deal, it's a fairly extensive list. And They have Germany and I believe France and the UK have all denied landing rights to Mahan Air, which is an Iranian commercial airline, which is a dual-use commercial airline and also ferries terrorists and weapons around the Middle East to their proxies. The EU did impose sanctions on Iran's Ministry of Intelligence for terrorism in Europe. And you've also had the E3 send a number of letters to the UN Security Council condemning Iran's space launch vehicle testing, Iran's ballistic missile testing. You had Boris Johnson a few weeks ago said the Iran deal is a bad deal with many, many defects. That has been our position.
Mr. Hook, my time is up. I just want to point out that the letters and speeches are delightful, but crippling sanctions on the part of our allies would make a real difference, I believe, in exacting a very substantial price on Iran and hopefully causing dissent within their own country. But I think it should be a high priority of our country to get other nations to join us in those crippling sanctions. My time is up, so I'm going to pass the time over to the
And I
chairman.
agree with that last point.
And can I say one other thing on that? I'm happy to submit for the record, this is 3 pages of European action starting in July 28th, going up to September 24th, 2019. I talk on a weekly basis with my European counterparts, not just the E3, but we just had Poland in town. We did a global ministerial on the Middle East to promote peace and stability in Warsaw, Poland. We had 65 nations from almost every continent attend. So we have made working with our partners a priority. That's under Secretary Hale, Secretary Pompeo, Deputy Secretary Sullivan. And so I'm happy to submit for the record 3 pages of everything that Europe has done to counter Iran's threats.
Thank you. Those will be included in the record for